My name is Naomi, and I am 34 years old. I used to believe that love meant trusting someone with your whole heart, even when the signs told you not to. For 8 years, I built a life with my husband Derek. We had a beautiful son named Ethan, a home in Austin, Texas, and what I thought was a perfect marriage. But one Friday afternoon, while I was picking up my 7-year-old from soccer practice, my husband emptied his closet and disappeared to Barcelona with another woman. What he did not know was that while he was building his new life across the ocean, I was making one single move that would destroy everything he thought he had. Before I tell you exactly what happened that day, and the move that changed everything, I want to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, hit that subscribe button, because this story might just give you the strength you need. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I met Derek at a small coffee shop in downtown Austin when I was 24 years old. I was working as a marketing associate for a tech startup at the time, spending my lunch breaks reviewing campaigns on my laptop while sipping overpriced lattes. That particular Tuesday, the shop was crowded, and I had managed to snag the last available table near the window. I remember the sunlight streaming through the glass, warming my face as I typed away at my keyboard. I was so focused on my work that I did not notice the tall man walking toward me with a cup of coffee in his hand. He was looking at his phone, not paying attention to where he was going. The next thing I knew, hot coffee was spilling all over my laptop and dripping onto my white blouse. I jumped up, my heart racing, watching in horror as my screen flickered and went black. The man stood there, frozen, his face turning red with embarrassment. He was 26, with sandy brown hair and the bluest eyes I had ever seen. He started apologizing profusely, his words tumbling over each other as he grabbed napkins and tried to clean up the mess. His name was Derek, and he had just started working at a major financial investment firm downtown. He insisted on buying me a new laptop, even though I told him it was an accident. When I refused, he asked if he could at least buy me another coffee and maybe dinner to make up for ruining my afternoon. I said yes, and we ended up talking for 3 hours that day. He had this way of making me feel like I was the most important person in the room. He asked questions about my work, my dreams, my family. He remembered every detail I shared with him. When I mentioned that I loved white peonies, he showed up to our second date with a bouquet of them. When I told him my favorite food was pasta carbonara, he learned how to make it from scratch. 6 months later, Derek proposed to me at that same coffee shop where we first met. He had arranged for the barista to write his question on my cup. I cried when I saw it, and I said yes before he could even get down on one knee. Our wedding was small, but perfect. We held it at a garden venue just outside the city, with only our closest family and friends in attendance. My mother, Linda, cried throughout the entire ceremony. She kept telling me how happy she was that I had found someone who looked at me the way Derek did. I believed her. I believed everything. After the wedding, we bought our first home together in Westlake Hills, a quiet suburb on the outskirts of Austin. It was a 4-bedroom house with a big backyard and a wraparound porch. I fell in love with it the moment we pulled into the driveway. I could already picture our future there. Children running through the grass, birthday parties in the backyard, holiday dinners around a big table. Derek was thriving at work. Within 2 years of our marriage, he had been promoted to senior financial analyst. He worked long hours, but he always made time for us. He would bring me flowers on random Tuesdays. He would leave little notes on my pillow, telling me how much he loved me. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. When I got pregnant with Ethan, we were both overjoyed. I remember the day I told Derek. I had bought a tiny pair of baby shoes and wrapped them in a box. When he opened it, he stared at them for a long moment, not understanding. Then his eyes went wide, and he pulled me into his arms so tight I could barely breathe. He was crying. I had never seen him cry before. 9 months later, our son was born. I watched Derek hold Ethan for the first time in the hospital room, tears streaming down his face. He looked at me and said, "I promise I will always protect you both." I believed that promise with every fiber of my being. For the next few years, life was beautiful. I transitioned to freelance marketing work so I could have a more flexible schedule and be present for Ethan. Derek continued to climb the corporate ladder. We took family vacations to the beach, spent Sundays having picnics in the park, and fell asleep every night wrapped in each other's arms. But when Ethan turned 4, things started to shift. Derek began traveling more for work. There were team-building retreats in different cities, client meetings that required overnight stays, conferences that lasted entire weekends. I never questioned it because that was his job. That was what successful people did. Sometimes he would come home late, smelling of expensive cologne that was not the one I had bought him. He would say he had dinner with international clients who insisted on going to fancy restaurants. Once I woke up at 2 in the morning and found him texting someone. When I asked who it was, he said it was a colleague in Europe who was in a different time zone. I accepted his explanation without hesitation. My best friend Jenna noticed the changes before I did. She had known me since high school and she could read me better than anyone. One afternoon, she asked me if everything was okay with Derek. She said he seemed different lately, distant, distracted. I brushed off her concerns, telling her he was just stressed from work. I did not want to see what was right in front of me. Looking back now, I realized that the perfect life I thought I had was just a carefully constructed illusion, and the cracks were already forming. I just refused to see them. The first major warning sign came in March when Ethan was 6 years old. Derek announced over dinner one evening that he needed to go to Barcelona for 2 weeks. He said there was an important project involving a new European partnership that required his presence. I looked up from my plate confused. I knew his company primarily operated in North America. They did not have any offices in Spain, as far as I was aware. When I asked him about the details, his expression shifted. His jaw tightened, and his voice took on an edge I had rarely heard before. "Why are you questioning me?" he asked. "Do you not trust me?" I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I apologized immediately, telling him I was just curious about his work. He relaxed slightly and gave me a brief explanation about a potential collaboration with a Spanish financial firm. I nodded and let the conversation drop, but something in my chest felt heavy for the rest of the evening. It was the first time I had ever felt afraid to ask my husband a simple question. A few weeks later, I was folding laundry in our bedroom when Derek's phone started buzzing on the nightstand. He was in the shower, and the phone kept vibrating with incoming messages. I walked over to silence it and saw the name on the screen. It just said the letter S with a small heart emoji next to it. My stomach dropped. I did not open the messages. I did not even pick up the phone. I just stared at it until the screen went dark, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When Derek came out of the bathroom, I asked him who S was. He did not miss a beat. He said it was Simone, a new team member he had been assigned to mentor. She was young and inexperienced, and she had a lot of questions about the projects they were working on together. He said the heart emoji was probably just how she communicated with everyone. "Some people are just like that," he said with a dismissive shrug. I felt foolish for even asking. I apologized for being paranoid and tried to push the uncomfortable feeling away. But that night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in my head, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. As the months went on, the distance between Derek and me grew wider. Our dinner conversations became shorter. He stopped asking about my day. The spontaneous hugs and kisses that used to punctuate our evenings disappeared entirely. I would try to plan romantic evenings for just the two of us, but he always had an excuse. A deadline at work, a call with an overseas client, a headache that would not go away. We had not been intimate in months. I blamed myself at first. Maybe I was not attractive enough anymore. Maybe I was not interesting enough. I started working out more, buying new clothes, cooking his favorite meals. Nothing seemed to make a difference. He would eat dinner in silence, then retreat to his home office until I fell asleep alone. Jenna came to visit one weekend and immediately noticed something was wrong. She said I looked exhausted, that I had lost weight, that the spark in my eyes had dimmed. She sat me down in my living room and told me something that made my blood run cold. She said she had seen Derek at a restaurant downtown a few nights earlier. He was sitting at a corner table with a woman who had striking red hair. They were leaning close together, talking and laughing like people who knew each other very well. Jenna said she watched them for a few minutes, trying to convince herself it was a business dinner. But something about their body language told her it was more than that. I felt my defensive walls go up immediately. I told Jenna it must have been a client meeting. Derek would never do something like that to me. He loved me. He loved Ethan. He would never throw away our family for someone else. Jenna took my hands in hers and looked me straight in the eyes. Naomi, she said, I am your best friend since high school. I am not saying this to hurt you. I am saying this because I love you. Please just pay attention. I pulled my hands away and asked her to leave. After she was gone, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until I had no tears left. I did not understand why I was crying. I still believed my husband was faithful. I still believed our marriage was solid. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice was whispering that something was terribly wrong. About a month later, I made a phone call that shattered what remained of my denial. I called Derek's office to ask his assistant about an upcoming business trip he had mentioned. I wanted to know the dates so I could plan accordingly for Ethan's school activities. The receptionist who answered was new, but she checked the travel records for me. After a moment of silence, she said something that made my world tilt sideways. I am sorry, she said, but according to our records, Mr. Derek has not been on any international business trips this quarter. I thanked her and hung up my hands, shaking. There had to be an explanation, I told myself. Maybe it was a confidential project. Maybe the receptionist did not have access to all the information. Maybe I had misunderstood something. I chose not to confront Derek about the discrepancy. I was terrified of what the truth might be. I chose silence, hoping that if I ignored the problem, it would somehow resolve itself. But silence, I learned, does not make the truth disappear. It only gives it more power to destroy you. It was a Friday in September. The weather in Austin was unusually pleasant, the kind of autumn day where the sky is perfectly blue and the air carries just a hint of coolness. I drove to Ethan's school to pick him up from soccer practice windows, down radio playing softly. Ethan came running toward the car with a huge grin on his face. He was covered in grass stains and dirt, his soccer uniform rumpled and sweaty. Before he even buckled his seatbelt, he started telling me about the goal he had scored during practice. It was his first one ever, and his excitement was contagious. I listened to every detail, laughing at his dramatic reenactment of the winning kick. We stopped for ice cream on the way home. He chose chocolate chip, his favorite. We sat on a bench outside the shop, enjoying our cones and watching the cars pass by. Ethan asked if we could get pizza for dinner, and I said yes without hesitation. It felt like a perfect afternoon, the kind of ordinary, beautiful moment that I used to take for granted. When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed immediately that Derek's car was not there. That was not unusual. He often worked late on Fridays. I did not think much of it as I helped Ethan out of the car and grabbed his soccer bag from the back seat. The moment I opened the front door, something felt different. The house was too quiet, too still. There was a coldness in the air that had nothing to do with the temperature. I told Ethan to go wash his hands while I checked on something. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, and that is when my heart stopped. Derek's closet was empty. Every shirt, every suit, every pair of shoes was gone. Only a few wire hangers remained swaying slightly in the breeze from the air conditioning vent. I stood there frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. I ran to his dresser. Empty. His nightstand drawer. Empty. The bathroom cabinet where he kept his toiletries. Completely cleared out. My legs carried me to his home office without my brain fully registering what I was doing. The desk drawers were open papers scattered across the floor. The small safe we kept important documents in was wide open and empty. His laptop was gone. His files were gone. Everything that mattered to him professionally had vanished. I heard Ethan calling for me from downstairs, and I forced myself to take a breath. I walked back down on shaking legs, trying to keep my face neutral. That is when I saw it. A white envelope sitting on the kitchen counter, my name written on the front in Derek's handwriting. I picked it up with trembling fingers and opened it. The letter inside was 2 pages long. I read it 3 times, but the words never made sense, no matter how many times I went over them. Derek wrote that he had not been happy in our marriage for years. He said he had felt trapped, suffocated by the routine of family life. He had found someone who truly understood him, someone who made him feel alive again. Her name was Simone, and they were moving to Barcelona together to start fresh. He said he would contact me through his lawyer to discuss divorce proceedings and visitation rights for Ethan. He did not apologize. He did not explain how he could abandon his son without even saying goodbye. He simply ended the letter by saying that he hoped I would eventually understand. I read that letter standing in my kitchen while my 7-year-old son waited for me to order pizza. The paper shook in my hands. My vision blurred. My knees gave out, and I slid down the kitchen cabinets until I was sitting on the cold tile floor. Ethan found me there a few minutes later. He knelt down beside me and wrapped his small arms around my neck. "Mommy, why are you crying?" he asked. His voice was so small, so scared. "Where are Daddy's clothes?" I pulled him close and held him tight, breathing in the smell of grass and sweat and childhood. I told him that Daddy had to go away for work for a while. I told him everything was going to be okay. I told him that Mommy was right there, and that I would never leave him. That night I lay beside Ethan until he fell asleep. I watched his chest rise and fall, his small face peaceful in the darkness. Then I went to the living room, sat in the corner of the couch, and cried until the sun came up. The next morning I started searching for answers. I tried to log into Derek's Facebook account to see if there was any information about where he had gone, but I discovered he had blocked me. I asked Jenna to help me find anything she could. Within an hour, she had found Simone Parker's Instagram profile. My stomach turned as I scrolled through her photos. She was 29 years old, with long red hair and a confident smile. She worked at the same company as Derek. Her recent posts showed beaches and European architecture and restaurant meals that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. And then I saw them. Photos of Derek and Simone together on a beach in Barcelona. They were posted just 2 days before he left, which meant the trip had been planned long in advance. In one photo, they were embracing on the sand at sunset. In another, they were clinking wine glasses at an outdoor cafe, both of them beaming at the camera. The caption read, "Starting our new chapter." I kept digging. I found posts dating back nearly 2 years. Photos from hotel rooftops in cities Derek had supposedly visited for business. restaurant check-ins at places he had never mentioned to me, gifts that Simone had received that looked suspiciously similar to ones Derek had given me. He had been living a double life for 2 years. Every business trip, every late night at the office, every excuse he had given me was a lie. While I was at home raising our son and trying to be a good wife, he was building a completely separate existence with another woman. The worst part was not that he left. The worst part was that I never saw it coming. I had spent years building a life with a man who was simultaneously building another life with someone else, and the realization of my own blindness hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. The first week after Derek left was the darkest time of my life. I could not eat. Food tasted like cardboard, and my stomach rejected everything I tried to force down. I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos of him and Simone laughing and embracing like they did not have a care in the world. I called in sick to my freelance clients and cancelled all my pending projects. I did not have the energy to work, to think, to do anything except lie in bed and stare at the ceiling. The house felt enormous and empty, filled with reminders of the man who had abandoned us. Ethan tried his best to take care of me. He would bring me glasses of water and crackers from the kitchen. He would crawl into bed beside me and pat my hair the way I used to pat his when he was scared. His tenderness broke my heart even more. A 7-year-old should not have to worry about his mother falling apart. On the 5th day, my mother Linda arrived. She had driven 4 hours from Houston the moment I called her, barely stopping to pack a bag. When she walked through the front door and saw me lying on the couch in the same clothes I had been wearing for 3 days, she did not say a word. She just sat down beside me and pulled me into her arms. I cried harder than I had ever cried in my life. I sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. My mother held me through all of it, stroking my hair and letting me release the pain that had been building inside me. She stayed for the next 3 weeks. She cooked meals and made sure Ethan got to school on time. She cleaned the house and did the laundry and kept everything running while I slowly pieced myself back together. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table and said something I will never forget. "Naomi," she said, "you are allowed to grieve. What Derek did to you was terrible, and you have every right to feel broken right now. But you are not allowed to give up. That little boy upstairs needs his mother, and more importantly, you need yourself. You are stronger than you think. You just have to remember how to find that strength." Her words planted a seed in my mind. I was not ready to act on them yet, but they stayed with me, slowly taking root. About 2 weeks after Derek left, I finally forced myself to face the financial reality of my situation. I logged into our joint bank accounts and discovered something that made my blood turn to ice. Our savings account, which should have had nearly $80,000 in it, had been drained. There was less than $500 remaining. Our joint credit cards were maxed out, carrying balances I had never agreed to. The total debt was over $45,000. I pulled up the transaction history and started going through it line by line. There were charges from luxury hotels in cities across Europe, expensive dinners at Michelin star restaurants, purchases from high-end jewelry stores, designer clothing boutiques, first-class airline tickets. Derek had been using our family money to fund his affair for years. Every romantic gesture he made for Simone, every lavish trip they took together had been paid for with money that was supposed to secure our son's future. I felt sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left in my stomach. Then I sat on the cold tile floor and made a decision. I was done being a victim. I was done waiting for things to get better on their own. It was time to fight back. That same night, I started going through Derek's home office with a fine-tooth comb. He had left in such a hurry that he did not have time to destroy everything. I found receipts stuffed in desk drawers, printed emails tucked into folders, bank statements from accounts I had never seen before. And then I found the box. It was hidden under a loose floorboard, beneath his desk, covered by a decorative rug. Inside were documents that changed everything. Financial reports from a company I had never heard of. Transfer records showing large sums of money moving to offshore accounts. Emails discussing investment strategies that sounded nothing like legitimate business dealings. As I read through those papers, the picture became horrifyingly clear. Derek had set up a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Over the past 3 years, he had been systematically transferring money from his employer into this offshore account. The total amount exceeded $800,000. My husband was not just a cheater, he was an embezzler. He had been stealing from his company for years, and the money he stole was now funding his new life in Barcelona with his mistress. I also found documents showing that Simone was involved in some of the transactions. She had signed paperwork and received wire transfers. She was not just his girlfriend. She was his accomplice. I sat on the floor of that office, surrounded by evidence of crimes I never could have imagined, and I realized something important. Derek thought he had left me with nothing. He thought I would fall apart without him, that I would be too broken and too helpless to do anything but wait for whatever scraps he decided to throw my way. But he had made a critical mistake. In his arrogance, he had left behind the very evidence I needed to take back my life. He thought he had all the power. He was wrong. 3 days after I found the documents, I sat in the office of Patricia Holloway, one of the most respected attorneys in Austin. She specialized in divorce cases involving complex financial situations and white-collar crime. Jenna had found her through a contact, and I had managed to secure an emergency consultation. Patricia was a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She wore a navy blue suit and minimal jewelry, projecting an air of quiet competence. She listened without interrupting as I laid out everything that had happened. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me with something like admiration. "Mrs. Naomi," she said, "your husband did not just cheat on you. He committed federal crimes. And you, if you play this right, can come out of this protected and compensated." She explained the strategy we would pursue. The first step was to file an anonymous report with Derek's employer and the Securities and Exchange Commission detailing the embezzlement. The evidence I had found would trigger an investigation that Derek could not escape. The second step was to file for divorce, immediately citing abandonment and adultery as grounds. We would include all the evidence of hidden assets and financial misconduct in our filing. This would ensure that I received a fair settlement and full custody of Ethan. The third step was to freeze any remaining joint accounts and separate my finances entirely from Derek's. This was crucial because when the investigation began, his assets would likely be seized. I needed to establish that I had no knowledge of or participation in his crimes. The fourth step was the most important for protecting my son's future. We would demonstrate that our house had been purchased with legitimate income before Derek began his illegal activities. This would prevent it from being subject to asset forfeiture. Patricia looked me in the eyes and said something that stayed with me. "This is not revenge," she said. "This is survival and justice. You are not doing anything wrong. You are simply refusing to be collateral damage in his crimes." I went home that night and executed the first part of the plan. I drafted an anonymous report detailing Derek's embezzlement scheme, attaching copies of all the evidence I had found. I sent it to both his company's ethics hotline and the SEC's tip line. Then I opened a new bank account in my name only and transferred the remaining funds from our joint accounts. The next morning I filed for divorce. While the legal wheels began turning, I focused on rebuilding my life. I could not control what would happen to Derek, but I could control what I did with my own time and energy. I threw myself back into my marketing work, taking on new clients and expanding my service offerings. I started waking up early to exercise before Ethan got up for school. I began eating regular meals again. I made a conscious effort to be fully present for my son. We established new routines together: Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon trips to the park, bedtime stories that I actually enjoyed instead of rushing through. Ethan stopped asking about his father as frequently. He seemed to sense that our little family of two was going to be okay. Jenna became my rock during this time. She would come over for dinner several nights a week, helping me cook and keeping me company. My mother visited as often as she could, always arriving with groceries and leaving with a cleaner house than she found. I was surrounded by people who loved me, and their support made all the difference. 3 months after I filed the reports, I received a call from Patricia with an update. Derek's company had completed their internal investigation and confirmed the embezzlement. They had turned their findings over to the FBI, who had opened a criminal case. The offshore accounts had been identified and frozen, meaning Derek no longer had access to the money he had stolen. But that was not the most satisfying part of the news. According to information Patricia had gathered, Simone had left Derek within weeks of learning that the money was gone. She had apparently signed up for a luxurious European lifestyle, not a life on the run with a broke fugitive. Without the funds to maintain their fantasy, she had disappeared back to the United States, leaving Derek alone in Barcelona. I listened to this news and waited to feel something: triumph, vindication, joy. But what I actually felt was a strange sense of peace. I had done what I needed to do to protect myself and my son. The consequences Derek was facing were the result of his own choices, not my actions. I was simply refusing to be dragged down with him. I did not do this for revenge, I told Patricia. I did this because I refused to be a victim. The one move I made was choosing to fight for myself and my son, instead of waiting for someone to save us. 4 months after Derek disappeared to Barcelona, I was in the backyard with Ethan on a Saturday afternoon. We were planting flowers together, a new hobby we had picked up as a way to spend time outdoors. Ethan was digging holes in the soil with a small trowel, his tongue sticking out in concentration. I heard a car pull up to the curb. When I looked toward the street, I saw a taxi idling in front of our house. The back door opened and a figure stepped out that made my heart stop. It was Derek. He looked nothing like the confident, successful man who had left 4 months earlier. He had lost weight, and his clothes hung loosely on his frame. His face was covered with patchy stubble, and there were dark circles under his eyes. His shirt was wrinkled, and his shoes were scuffed and dirty. He looked like a man who had hit rock bottom. Ethan saw his father and froze. He did not run to greet him the way he would have before. He just stood there, trowel in hand, watching with uncertain eyes. I put my hand on his shoulder and told him to go inside and find Grandma Linda, who was visiting for the weekend. He nodded and walked toward the house, looking back over his shoulder several times. Derek approached me slowly, trying to project confidence despite his disheveled appearance. "Naomi," he said, "I am back. We need to talk." I stood up from where I had been kneeling in the dirt and brushed the soil off my gardening gloves. I did not say anything. I just watched him, waiting to see what he would do next. He cleared his throat and continued. "I came to collect the rest of my belongings," he said, "and we need to discuss the house. I have rights here, you know. This is still my property, too." His voice had that same condescending tone I remembered from our marriage, the tone that suggested I should be grateful for his attention, the tone that assumed I would do whatever he wanted, because I had always done whatever he wanted. I waited until he finished speaking. Then I told Ethan to go inside, and I faced my husband for the first time since he had abandoned us. "Derek," I said calmly, Let me tell you exactly where you stand right now." His expression flickered with confusion. He was not used to this version of me. The Naomi he knew would have been crying by now, begging him to explain, asking what she had done wrong. I told him about the documents I had found, the offshore accounts, the embezzlement scheme, the evidence that linked him and Simone to federal crimes. I told him about the reports I had filed and the investigations that had followed. I told him that the FBI was looking for him and that his assets had been frozen. I told him about the divorce filing and the evidence we had submitted. I told him that I was seeking full custody of Ethan, and that given his abandonment and criminal activity, any judge would grant it. I told him that the house was protected because it had been purchased before his illegal activities began, and that it was now solely in my name. As I spoke, I watched the colour drain from his face. The arrogance disappeared. The confidence crumbled. By the time I finished, he looked like a man watching his entire world collapse around him. "Naomi, please," he started. His voice cracked. "I made a mistake. I was stupid. Simone meant nothing to me. You are my wife. We can work this out. Just withdraw the reports. Tell them you made a mistake. We can start over." He actually got down on his knees in front of me, tears streaming down his face. He grabbed my hand and started begging. He promised he would change. He promised he would be a better husband, a better father. He said he would do anything if I would just help him make this all go away. I looked down at the man I had loved for 10 years, the man I had built my entire adult life around, the man who had fathered my child and then abandoned us both without a second thought. I waited to feel something. Anger, pity, satisfaction. What I felt instead was clarity. I finally understood that this man had never truly loved me. He had loved what I could do for him. He had loved my loyalty, my forgiveness, my willingness to overlook his flaws. Now that I was no longer useful to him, he was trying to manipulate me one last time. "Derek," I said, pulling my hand away from his grasp. "I am not doing this out of hatred. I am doing this because you made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." I told him that he had chosen to abandon his son without even saying goodbye. He had chosen to steal and lie. He had chosen Simone and Barcelona and a life built on deception. Those were his choices, and I could not undo them even if I wanted to. And I chose to stop being the woman who waits and hopes and forgives endlessly, I continued. I chose to stop pretending that your happiness matters more than mine. I chose to protect my son and myself. That is the choice I made. And I would make it again. Derek stood up slowly. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. "I do not know who you are anymore," he said. "That is because I finally know who I am," I replied. I told him to leave. I told him the next time I saw him would be in court. He stood there for a long moment as if waiting for me to change my mind. When I did not move, when I did not waver, he finally turned and walked back to the taxi. A week later, he was arrested at the airport, trying to board a flight back to Europe. The trial took several months. He was convicted of embezzlement and sentenced to prison. Simone was also charged as an accomplice and faced her own legal consequences. The divorce was finalized without complications. I received full custody of Ethan, kept the house, and was awarded a portion of Derek's legitimate assets as part of the settlement. More importantly, I was finally free. He came back expecting to find a broken woman begging for his return. Instead, he found someone he had never met before, a woman who had finally learned to put herself first. The months that followed Derek's arrest were not easy. Healing is never a straight line, and there were many nights when the pain came rushing back like a wave. I would lie in bed, remembering the good times, the early days of our relationship, when everything seemed perfect. I would wonder what I could have done differently, whether I had missed signs that could have prevented all of this. Therapy helped. I found a counselor who specialized in relationship trauma, and I started seeing her twice a week. She helped me understand that I was not responsible for Derek's choices. Trusting someone you love is not stupidity, it is humanity. The fact that he betrayed that trust says everything about him and nothing about me. Gradually, the dark days became less frequent. I started to feel like myself again. Not the old Naomi who had defined herself through her marriage, but a new version, a stronger version, a woman who knew her own worth and refused to settle for less. My marketing business began to flourish. I took on more clients and eventually brought on a part-time assistant to help with the workload. Within a year, I had saved enough to officially register as an LLC. It was a small agency, just me and 2 contractors. But it was mine. I had built it from nothing during the worst period of my life, and that made every success feel earned. Ethan thrived as well. Children are resilient, and he adapted to our new normal faster than I expected. He was 8 now, still playing soccer, still making me laugh with his silly jokes. He asked about his father occasionally, and I answered his questions as honestly as I could without burdening him with adult problems. I knew that someday we would have a longer conversation about what happened, but for now he just needed to know that he was loved and safe. Jenna remained my closest friend, and our bond only grew stronger through everything we had been through together. She was the one who had warned me about Derek when I refused to see the truth. She was the one who helped me find a lawyer and supported me through the legal process. She never once said "I told you so." That is what true friendship looks like. My mother visited every few weeks, always arriving with homemade food and leaving with a list of things she wanted to buy for Ethan. She told me constantly how proud she was of me. That pride meant more than any award or accolade ever could. I spent a lot of time thinking about forgiveness during those months. People told me I should forgive Derek for my own peace of mind. They said holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I understood the sentiment, but I came to my own conclusion about what forgiveness meant for me. I did not forgive Derek because he deserved it. He never apologized. He never showed genuine remorse. He only cried and begged when he needed something from me. That is not someone who deserves forgiveness. But I did let go of my anger. Not for his sake, but for mine. Carrying that weight was exhausting, and it was taking energy I needed for better things. So I released it. I stopped hoping he would suffer. I stopped replaying our conversations in my head. I simply accepted that he was a chapter of my life that had ended, and I closed the book. The lessons I learned from this experience are ones I carry with me every day. I learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. I learned that my value is not determined by how someone treats me. It is determined by how I treat myself when they fail me. I learned that being strong does not mean never breaking down. It means getting back up every single time. Most importantly, I learned that the best revenge is not destruction. It is building a beautiful life without the person who tried to destroy you. One evening recently, Ethan and I were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was cool and fresh. He leaned against my shoulder and asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Mum," he said, "are you happy?" I thought about everything I had been through. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the fear and uncertainty, the slow, painful process of rebuilding my life from scratch. And then I thought about where I was now: a successful business, a beautiful home, a healthy, happy son, friends and family who loved me unconditionally, a sense of peace I had never known before. Yes, baby, I said, wrapping my arm around him. I am finally happy. If you are going through something similar right now, I want you to know that you will survive this. The person who hurt you does not get to decide how your story ends. You do. And maybe, just maybe, the worst thing that ever happened to you will turn out to be the beginning of the best chapter of your life. My name is Naomi. I am 34 years old. My husband moved to Barcelona with his mistress while I picked up my son from soccer practice. But when he came back, expecting to take everything, he found out that I had already taken back the most important thing: myself. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone you trusted let you down? What gave you the strength to keep going? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like so more people can find it. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss more stories like this one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video with them. Sometimes a story is exactly what someone needs to remind them of their own strength. Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care of yourselves and remember, you are stronger than you think. You are worthy of love and respect. And no matter what anyone else does, your story is yours to write. Until next time.